Who else? So, the minutes from the last meeting. Anybody have any changes? They are minimalistic, but there could be mistakes. I didn't see any myself, but Joe Pryor, he was here. Anybody want to approve?
Motion
I
to
make a,
Second.
Lisa approves. Motion to approve. Richard, seconds. All in favor? Any discussion?
aye.
Any discussion? Is that how this goes? And aye, okay.
You
Well,
want me
Lisa-
to do it? Do you want me to do it again this time, Todd?
Yes, please, sir.
Yeah, all right. Apologize, it's pretty brief, but let me go. I'll get a pencil. I'll be back.
Apologies necessary. We've got a video. If somebody really wants to drill down into this event, just go watch the video, because you really, personally, I think that's the best. But I know there are different theories about this, but so all those in favor to approve?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, let's move on. So on to the first item, which is this incredible piece of work that Lisa and
Barbara.
Barbara Herbst, who's at the Board of Finance, put together. And for those of you who aren't aware, this document has to be very, very plain and very straightforward. There can be no position taken. I think the way Mr. Fozzie put it, no exhortation as to whether or not to vote up or down on this. It has to be, as straightforward as possible. And I think Lisa's done a great job. But we felt it very important to put it past the committee in the event that anybody on the committee wanted to discuss anything or have anything explained. So that's why I sent it out early, hoping people would read it. It also is important that it be 2 pages at the most, so that we can have a front and a back, and it will be an insert in the Chronicle. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa next, because it really is, she was responsible for the document. And Lisa, I'll let you take it from here, all right?
Okay. Todd is quite right in saying that this is not a document with a point of view. The only colorful word that I think I see in here is the word picturesque to describe the Housatonic River, which we might remove. But other than that, we really tried to keep it as plain and simple as possible. This kind of explainer is what I call it. It's an explaining document. It's really helpful to help people get a whole picture of what's going on. This is an enterprise that's been going on for 6 or more years, trying to organize some support around this, to organize how we might do it, to get the economic and environmental impact studied. And this is what we've come up with finally. The Department of Agriculture grant, which may quite possibly be as much as 45% of the cost of the project, is just a huge benefit. Also, they loan us the remaining cost at very, very low interest. So this is a good deal. This is me promoting it now. But this document just lays out the facts. This is what we did. This is what we came up with. This is how we're going to go forward. We still don't have a location, which is we may, by the time of the meeting we're talking about here, which is the information meeting on July 10th, I believe. We may have a site by then. We don't right now. That's not a requirement of the US Department of Agriculture to get their grant. But it describes sort of what West Cornwall has been facing all these years with various forms of septic systems. Some work well, others don't. We tried to cost out what the impacts are going to be on the users and on the town as a whole. And I think we make it as clear as we can that it's the opinion of this committee that the town is going to have some major skin in this game, and that there will be a budget set of line items, just like any other department, sanitation, highway, which will be the town's contribution to the success of this system. We've got a little picture at the bottom of the second page, which Steve came up with, I think. And this is about the size of the building that would be required to contain not the system itself, which will be underground, but all the shovels and rakes and chemicals and things that have to go toward keeping the thing going. So there it is. And Barbara did a wonderful job laying out all the financial aspects of it. I think it's really pretty clear. So this is what will go to the, yeah, there it is. We'll go to the meeting with this. Who's showing this? Because I don't, well, maybe, yeah.
It's me. I think it's
Okay.
the latest version I had from you after you tweaked it.
Oh, okay, because we somehow got it on one page, but that's okay.
Well, this might not be the latest.
Yeah,
We'll circulate it at some point.
Are we gonna get, you want to tell us what you tweaked, or do you just want to hear any reactions, or what do you want?
Todd, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that, yeah, it's time for people on the committee to weigh in on this document. Let's hear what you have to say and any questions.
I have a question. It's more for Steve, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's paragraph 3, where it says the village lies on top of a tight arrangement of property lines. And, that's the start of the paragraph. But it says the environmental report prepared by WMC Consulting Engineers reported that Torrington Area Health District has records indicating that many of the village systems do not meet current health code. Is there any documentation on that? Because people are saying, well, and I'm not going to tell people's names, but people are saying, well, whose septic doesn't meet codes or whose water? But we don't have, do we have a report anywhere from Torrington Area Health specifically addressing specific properties that don't meet a code? Because we can make that statement and it's a great sales pitch, but is that all it is?
Well, your neighbor's property was not, when it was last sold, it was known that it sold very cheaply because it could not come up to code.
Right, I remember you telling me.
They can't stop a property owner from using their property because it doesn't come up to code. So they allowed them to put in what was the next best thing, but it's not up to code. So they do have a list. And if it was really needed, they probably could be pressed to come up with a list of systems that are existing but are currently subpar.
And that would be good, because we don't know that. I mean, we don't know whose it is, but
We don't need to know for the sake of that paragraph how many.
Well, if you're sending it to the town and people ask me, how many, I could say 6. I wouldn't designate someone's name. Don't say I don't need to know. This is part of what the committee does. Everybody is under suspicion by the way this paragraph is read.
I think part of the thing when we had, this goes back a couple of years when that report was done by the health district, in my memory. And I think all that means is there's a date when they started keeping files on people's septic systems. And I think it's
Right.
1980. And all that means is not up to code, could mean that they don't have any file on your system. It doesn't mean that your system's failing. It doesn't mean
Oh, okay.
that you have a problem bubbling up. It means that they don't have a record of what's in the ground, and they're not prepared to go throughout West Cornwall or the town to find out who has a modern system. That's all it means. That if, and as Ian said, if there's a situation that where somebody tries to sell their property and they don't have a file on it, then you're gonna be called non-compliant because
Right.
you may not be on file. Then you're gonna have to figure out what it is. That may be one thing. They may also know properties that have cesspools which don't meet the code. So you have a couple of different possibilities,
Right.
but we could dig that out. But it was a significant number. Maybe half of the properties they felt were not up to code. Some because of lack of record, and some because of things that are old.
Does that make
Yeah.
the paragraph not quite accurate then, or I don't know, does
No,
anybody feel?
I think it's fine because that's what they said. It's not up to code with that explanation that they don't know what's in the ground there. But just because they don't know what's in the ground means it's not up to code because they don't have
Right,
some sort of engineered report saying you've got, if some people's houses I know have put in a system since 1980 and have a report, and they would be then up to code because there's a report saying this is what happened.
right.
But when it
I
says
agree.
there
I
were
I
there are
agree
many
with Don.
things.
I think that, with your explanation, Gordon, it makes more sense. But without it, I think that perhaps it is a bit misleading. I had underlined the word many in that next to the last has records indicating many of the village systems. I wasn't questioning it at the level Don was, he's more detailed questioning. But I think some reworking of that sentence
Yeah,
might make it less misleading.
Well, I think also what I would think that something like that, and I think is a valid comment, maybe you can just take out many or something. There's systems there. We know there's systems, and maybe we can designate Lisa to be the editor in chief and take the sense of these comments and make the text reflect it. Our goal is to get, something to the Board of Selectmen for our meeting next week and then get it on to the attorney. But I think there's a way to do that. Lisa, wouldn't you think? If you just even put
Oh,
systems,
sure. Yeah.
there are systems in the village that meet it, that, or don't have records or whatever. We know there are,
Mhm.
we know there are cesspools out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the other
Where
thing,
it's incomplete records.
yeah, Gordon, if I could intervene here. I'm sure that the purpose of this is not accusatory. We're not trying to
mm,
pin something on somebody. What we're trying to offer is a solution to people. And I think that needs to get across as much as we can. I do see your point about many. Many is
Like
such a,
Change it
It's
to
such
a-
numerous. How about
Yeah.
numerous? Numerous.
that's my only
instead of
problem.
many.
Numerous, I think, is problematic too.
Mhm.
well,
Let's take it out.
seems to me that's assuming a large number, and I don't think we're saying that. But let me come up with something. I'll think of something.
Even
I'll
if
see
it's-
if I can dig that out or talk to Kathy Weber. If
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
it matters if it's 50% or 42%.
Yeah.
One leaky system could, with all the wells there, could be a problem.
Yeah,
Yes,
so I
Steve?
think,
Systems.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt,
go ahead,
Please.
Steve.
but there's actually a map that the Torrington Area Health District provided us and you that shows, in their opinion, which lots are non-compliant with the health code.
Oh.
It's right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong. But historically, if you've got an on-site well and an on-site septic system, in order to be compliant, you probably need a half an acre of land on your property. And they've got a map that shows what they feel are the properties that are non-compliant with the health code. Which you have.
Okay.
Some
Is that
properties
map-
have their,
Is that map on public? Could we see that map?
Absolutely, you have that map. Somebody has that. I can
yeah,
take
I'm
it
sure
out.
I do somewhere.
Yeah,
But there's also was there was one of our meetings had both Kathy and Tom, and Richard videoed it, and it has them both talking about the fact that there are systems. I don't know if it's many or not, but there are systems that are, non-compliant.
But we have to
So-
respect the privacy. I think.
I think so
spoke
too.
When I said, could we see the map? I think we don't have to put names to them
No.
to respect their privacy, but maybe a small group of people could identify it with Steve's help.
I think also for the purposes of this thing that we'll dig out that percentage and we can give you numbers next time. I think as far as getting this approved by the state or by the attorney, I don't think that one, whether we put numerous, many, or just systems, I don't think that's going to really hinge the discussion.
But these questions do come up, and I think I watched a 2-year-old meeting that you had at the Hughes Library,
Right.
where
Yeah.
Torrington Area Health and DEEP came, and they just danced all around the idea of making any kind of definitive calculation about this. They kept saying, well, fine, we're just reactive. We come when it's all bubbling up out of the ground, or we don't know, we don't care. You remember, I was sort of fascinated with it. Anyway, but so
No, I think
digging down deep onto individual properties, I don't think is a good idea. I mean, it's perfectly clear from looking at that landscape with all those tiny house lots and,
We're talking like
it
Steve
could
said
be
a
better.
half
It
acre.
could be
We're
better.
talking about less than 1/10 of acre lots. And we know one of those lots had a failed system last year. So, I mean,
This is a
it's there.
rehash of the same thing we've talked about. This is the same thing that's been going on, the discussion. Well, there's no, wide open, there's no absolute proof that there's sewage in the Housatonic River. I mean, that's the comment anyway. I'm not saying that that's not true. I'm just saying that it's the same thing that's being said over and over and over. The reality is that, as Steve has said, you need up to or close to a half acre to have a legitimate current code compliant system with your well and your property line borders and a septic system. And it just doesn't exist on most or many or numerous properties, or whatever term you want to use, in the properties that exist in West Cornwall.
Yeah.
I think maybe the word numerous wouldn't be a bad one. Substitute many for numerous.
I would rather you left it out.
I mean, just any kind of qualifying word.
Or some.
I was gonna say, what about some? I mean, it's,
Well, I'd be prepared to get up at the informational meeting and say specifically the buildings along the path of this system, how many, and specifically which buildings weren't being up to code at this time.
But we can't write things that are pushing in one direction or the other. We're supposed to be neutral in this.
And well, at the informational meeting, we could talk to anybody who brought up questions.
Yes.
And so the question of many or whatever adjective we use, is that relative to the entire town or to the area that this is currently meant to serve, which is Main Street and Railroad Square? If you look at the areas that it's running through that people are going to actually hook up from, it is a large percentage, because those are where all the buildings that need septic systems are currently existing. The ones off of Main Street, which would run the percentage down, they've got land to put in septic systems currently.
Well, Ian, I think that brings up something 2 paragraphs down, where we come to the point where it says, while the primary purpose of the treatment plant would be to bring the properties into compliance with the health code, it would further facilitate village revitalization. What you're saying is that the primary purpose of this system is economic revitalization and not residential. So, I mean, we can't have the argument both ways, because then we lose.
No, I would say it is also residential because there's a number of apartments
Well,
that could be used along that main street
well,
if
that's,
we had this septic system.
that's what you just said. It's also residential. If you look at the language that's been written here, the primary purpose is to bring properties into compliance with the health code. That's looking at homes. It would further facilitate village revitalization. Maybe it should say the primary purpose of the treatment plant would be to further facilitate village revitalization at both a residential and commercial level.
I don't
Mhm.
see where you make the difference there. I mean, it's,
It's a bit of a difference
I
of a
think it's well
difference, I
written the way it
agree.
is.
Yeah,
Can you,
But-
can you have two primary reasons?
I
mean,
don't
by
know why
definition,
not.
I mean, maybe by definition, you strictly can't, but in reality, both issues are driving the project, probably
Okay.
equally.
That's
Right.
what I think
Of
that's-
Right.
I can reconstruct that sentence with something like of equal importance or something like that. Let me work on that.
And
Thank
by
you.
definition, village revitalization does not mean, village revitalization doesn't mean one or the other, commercial or residential. It means either or both.
Mhm.
That's what I said, Richard.
So you don't need to say anything. Village revitalization, period.
Well, the way
Yeah.
it's constructed now, it's a sub-sentence following, it would further facilitate. It's
Yeah,
not
I can-
equal.
I can rework that, Joanne.
Thank you, Lisa.
Well, I think including what Steve is saying, that there are in fact two primary reasons. Compliance with the health code, which will lead to village revitalization. I mean, they go together.
Okay. Anybody else have another specific item they want to drill down into? Yep.
In the first paragraph, we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a price tag of basically $5 million on this. Is that, I mean, I thought we were at a little over $3 million at one point, or 33.5 million or something. Is that the accurate number? Or
Yeah.
isn't that
Yeah.
a number that we threw out for
That's
getting
what the,
approval from the government? You know,
Yeah,
that
that's
they
the-
would approve the 45% up to that amount.
Right.
But we're presenting that number to the public in this document as if we expect this thing to cost that much money.
well, what we're saying here is that the town is approving up to this amount. And the USDA has seen this, and this is what they're basing their percentages and calculations on.
But do we also, is there some place where we can present the numbers closer to the reality that we expect to spend?
Well, I don't know, Steve, not until
don't-
we get going
I
on
don't-
it.
I
you know.
wouldn't want to hang my hat on that. I'll be honest
Yeah.
with you. I think the estimates that we have right now, particularly with some of the sites that we're looking at and things of that nature with contingencies, I think you need to look at the number that you've got there as being the upset limit. If you start looking at, no one knows what this is going to cost. It hasn't been designed, hasn't been
Mhm.
permitted, hasn't been bid. There's no way of knowing exactly what this is going to cost until the bids come in and the project is constructed. But certainly after the design is done and the bids come in, you have a much better idea of what it's going to be. But I think you really need to have the upset limit where you have it, so that hopefully you don't have to go back to the public and say, well, guess what? It's going to be more than this, you know?
Mhm.
But
All right, that's fine.
This is the, this is the way we've handled every school, renovation thing. We get an estimate, we go for the bonding based on that number. And often the bidding, especially in a climate like this one, where the economy has been so poor.
Mhm.
Although the guys have been very busy, I will say that. People are hungry for the work, and we might do pretty well.
Lisa,
And the interest rates are very, very low.
Very low, yeah.
well, they're higher than now than they are in here. But Lisa, my question is actually the flip side of that. When we were originally looking at this, I think one reason we stayed with the number we did was because it was under 5 million and the requirements changed if we propose something over 5 million, so we.
That's
didn't-
correct. Yeah.
So my question is, do we not owe the public at least one sentence that says what will happen if and when? I mean, who ever heard of a government project that came in under bid or under estimates?
Any number of Cornwalls, Joanne,
Really?
any
Wait.
number. Yep.
We come in under bid much, we rarely come in over bid. But again, I think Steve is the one that really has the handle on the cost figures, and those are the cost figures that we should use.
Right.
And I think the easy answer is if you come over bid, then we go back and we redesign, or whatever, we go back.
Mhm.
Can we put a
This
sentence?
is an
in
up
that
to
says
limit, that's it. But I don't think we should have, again, part of the purpose of this is to be very concise, and there could be scenarios that happen in the future or something, but I think there's no need to explain that part, because there's plenty of things we can explain. But I
And we
think
can do it.
I think this is very good and concise. The only thing, and I hate to be a backseat editor, but we could put in there up to that amount, because that's often the way we put language in there.
Mhm.
Is
That's
we
a-
appropriate to that number. We're not going to spend that just because that's what they've authorized. If we can do it for less, then we will do it for less.
Okay, I changed it.
Good. That's a good recommendation, I think.
All right.
And Lisa, just so I understand, even if it's not going to be told to the public, so I understand, if it comes in at more, what happens?
We go back to the town meeting with
Well-
the excess, it's just like any add-on has to be approved.
Right.
And we would have to go through the process again.
It has
of
to go
getting-
back, it has to
Yeah.
go back to the Board of Selectmen, back to the Board of Finance, and
Yeah.
then decide what to do. The project, if it comes in, the cheapest bid is even $5 million, then we don't have that money. Then it's back up to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance to say, what's next? Is it closed? I mean, Woodridge Lakes came in 40% higher, and
Yeah.
that project is pretty stalled. So this is just for that project. And I think we have just told the public what happens, and we've told that in other meetings, that we're just talking about this project, which our best estimate is this amount of money. And there are
Yeah.
contingencies cut to cover us if we find things, if there are things out there that we haven't anticipated.
Yeah, there's a big contingency number in this 4.9. So,
Right.
That's fine. I
Steve,
think that's
Steve,
contrary to
you-
what Steve just said. There is no contingency number because we don't know what the number is.
Steve, were you trying to interject something there from?
No, I was just gonna say that there's a few things that could happen. Obviously, Gordon hit the nail on the head in terms of the local approval process. But if the number comes in higher than anticipated for whatever reason, sometimes during the bidding process, items come up that there may be be able to cost save in different ways. So the project could be possibly reconfigured, and or USDA will then look at the project and go, my opinion is that historically, if a project comes in higher, they will fund it. The reason we kept below the $5 million was to have the regional approval process opposed to a national approval process. It's not a big deal difference really, but it is a difference. And so if in fact it goes above that, then it has to go to the national approval process for that much money. My preference would be to have the project come in under budget, because I think it's already a lot of money and I wouldn't want to spend any more personally.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's premature to
I think
talk
we all
about.
agree.
yeah. Yeah, I think this is a pretty safe number here. And from what I've seen of the budgeting of how it's going to be spent, there was a big chunk for unforeseeables, discretion that USDA even asked about it. Remember, Steve, in their questions? Yeah,
Having said that, the project originally as configured was for a site for the treatment facility that was closer to the river and everything was flowing
Yeah.
by gravity. Now we're
Yeah.
possibly looking at a site that's not by the river. So we're gonna have to, in some fashion, get sewage uphill to this site, wherever it might be. And so there's an additional cost, but I think we can absorb that within the project budget at this point.
Couple of more pumps.
Yes.
But if you're going up site, I mean, are we gonna have the same pushback with residents that are up site? I mean, have we taken any?
You can't predict that, David. It's like,
I agree.
no one wants it, you know? The bottom line is, no one wants it in there. Everybody's in, well, not everybody's in favor. I don't want to speak for anybody. My opinion is people are in favor of the project, just as long as it isn't near them. And you're
Exactly.
never going to satisfy 100%. And one of the
Mhm.
sites we're looking at now, there are a few residents in the area, but in reality, it's really not, it's in a more commercial type of setting, not right next to a bunch of neighbors. So,
Yeah, you know, and in the end, when you come right down to it, when your septic system that you thought was working properly and turns out to be leaking into your well, you will now have an option to do something about it.
right,
And you wouldn't without
Right.
this system.
right. Or Lisa, if in fact you go to sell your property and someone says, wait a minute,
Exactly.
you've got a non-compliant septic system, I'm not buying that for that. You know, I'm not gonna buy
God,
it.
no. Yeah.
All
No,
right, so let's not drift too far off what we're trying
okay.
Sorry.
to get a sense of whether or not the Gordon can go to the selectmen confident that this explanatory text reflects what we all think is sort of the baseline of what we're trying to accomplish when a referendum occurs, which is to
Mhm.
have an educated public so that they can vote on whether or not the town ought to spend up to $5 million on
Mhm.
this kind of a project. So,
Yeah. I'll
I
make
ask
these changes. I'm sorry, Don, go ahead.
I just have one other question, Lisa. If, it's really well done, but it just says all property owners in West Cornwall Village. Can you be more specific? Because it's just Main Street and Railroad Plaza. It's not going down Upper River Road or anything. Will someone question that when they say, oh, you're all gonna have septic, but it says you all have the ability to hook up to it. Is that sentence gonna mislead people or something?
I
I
don't
don't,
believe it will, but Steve, could you explain
Yeah,
that?
well, let me go,
How- Yeah,
which
I'm sorry.
sentence, Don,
it's
which
on,
sentence?
Yeah, Don, where's that paragraph?
Page 2, and it
Yeah.
go up from the bottom, and it says all property owners in the West Cornwall Village will have a way to tap into the main line.
Mhm.
Is that true? If somebody wants to, I mean,
Oh, yeah, I see, okay.
I don't, I don't know. I mean, it's all written well, but it's just a question.
Oh, I see where you're talking. Okay.
oh, yeah, okay.
There's always a way, there'll always be a way for all the property owners to tap into the system.
Oh,
The question is, it will come down to cost and things of that nature. If someone's in a remote location and there's nobody between them and the main system, there's gonna be a cost for that,
right.
maybe borne by a single property owner, but maybe borne by the people that are all along that route. But there's always a way to connect up to the system. And the system is sized to be able to accommodate that as well.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, that's the sizing issue that, you remember New Hartford got into this problem where they had to sell their septic and water system to Aquarian, is because they were sold some, Steve, you know more about this than I do. They wound up with some enormous system that was just way beyond what their needs were apparently. And it just got out of control.
It did. That was partially DEP's fault. DEP came in and actually made them oversize that, thinking that all these other areas were going to be accommodated and come into,
Oh,
and
yeah.
maybe at some point they will, but right now they're not. So
Yeah, pretty much.
financially, it's tough
Yeah.
to account
So
for
we're
that.
not gonna have that problem because we have a finite area. So.
Right, right.
They're talking about.
Okay, well, I'll make these changes and give them to Gordon. And so then the board will look at it, and then at some point, Attorney Joseph Fozzie, the much feared bond counsel, will take a look at it, and his will be the final word. So,
Good. I guess we can move on. All right. One of the things Gordon has just talked about was getting some kind of more visual informational stuff on the website. And Gordon, you still here somewhere? Yeah, Gordon, you want to talk a little bit about
Oh,
some of
just a
the
couple thoughts.
ideas,
One,
Duncan's
I mean,
drawings?
well, I just thought that one thing I talked to Steve about was maybe just because we did visit that system up at Salisbury School, which is different than what we talked about, what we're talking about here in some ways, but it is a system that's accommodating 500 people, which is many more people and many younger people than we're talking about here. And again, it's the only really visual part is the building, but I just thought a quick summary of that project might be good, as well as if Richard is so inclined.
Yes, I was going to say a video. You want a video? I got it.
I mean, I thought
That's
what
it.
you could do is do
Several videos.
a best of Saybrook video, because we visited different systems there. And right there are good systems that have been operated for a while, that are not smelly, that are not noisy. They're right in the middle of places. And if we could just say, here's a system, blah, 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 blah. Again, we now have a place on the website. We can put up a couple of visual things, say this is the type of system we're talking about. They're contained, they're small, they're relatively innocuous. I just thought that would be a good project. If you could pour through that video that Todd took, it shows systems, and there's one located underneath the restaurant, and you can't tell.
And one place also to put it would be the Cornwall Community Network too, because that really gets a lot.
Yeah, or whatever. I mean, I just
notice.
thought if you could do a best of video of our road trips, that would sort of be good. I mean, and I understand that's a big thing, but Lisa's just done a big thing, and we have time.
Richard, did you do a Salisbury? Did you do a Salisbury video too, or no?
I'd have to check my YouTube page, or anybody can go to my YouTube
I don't remember
page.
the song. You were there though, weren't you?
Yeah.
You probably brought your camera.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. I think that's a good idea.
I sent Gordon a couple pictures of the Salisbury plant recently, but if Richard wants to go up there, we certainly can arrange another visit.
Yeah,
No
that might be an
problem.
idea. How about drawings, Gordon, from Duncan, perhaps? And his
Duncan.
architectural. Duncan, isn't his name not Duncan? Mr. Betts.
Yeah,
He's talking about doing some Photoshop stuff, but I'm not sure what his schedule is on all that. So I'll check it back with him and see how far he's going. I know they're trying to open up some stores there. So yeah, I'll see where he's at with that.
Well, what about another visit to Salisbury with open to non-committee members, town members, public? Is that permissible?
What do you think, Steve?
Whatever you want.
We can make a video to save everybody the trip.
Yeah, that's an older facility now. It's 15 or so years old. Again, we can make the town can make this facility look like the picture in Lisa's handout. Or
yeah. this thing.
I mean, that's a typical, it could look like a carriage house. And in fact, there was a hotel on one site we were looking at. There was a hotel. There was a carriage house or I don't know what you call it, a barn type of thing.
Yeah. Is it?
Doesn't look like anything. And
Yeah.
Salisbury School doesn't look like anything in special in particular because it's kind of isolated from the campus. I'm not sure that's the best thing to be showing people, but it does show the size of the building, basically.
Right. Well, it blends in architecturally with.
Yeah, I mean, you
the
can make
countryside.
architecture look like anything you want.
Right.
I would suggest that, we could consult Marina, who's certainly in touch with, marketing online about, what her suggestions might be to help take this forward.
Okay.
The marketing part of it.
Marketing.
Mhm.
Okay.
She had
Present
expressed
video
an interest, once we had something, she's told me that she would be willing to take a look at this, and I know professionally that she does this, so.
I was also asked by the Cornwall Association to ask the committee whether you would want the Cornwall Association to host whether it's your informational meeting or a different one, or could they do anything to be helpful?
Mhm. That's good. That's good to
I
know.
think we can go into the schedule. I think the big thing that, are we at the schedule yet?
Yeah, we can
I
go
mean,
to,
those are a couple of projects because we do have, again, immediately just publicizing the website, where there's a place on the Cornwall website for this committee and it shows the meetings, the minutes, Steve's report. We can put Lisa's
Yeah.
piece up there. And so that's all good. Now, let me tell you quickly about the schedule. Again, we haven't, this hasn't been approved by the board, but I have talked to the town clerk because one of our checklist issues is the whole voting process, in absentee ballots and things. And what's interesting probably only to me is that we just gone through the big national election with people challenging votes and stuff. But what's important for people to know is that absentee ballots for this will be different than absentee ballots for the presidential election. There was a special law passed in Connecticut that allowed people as a by right absentee ballot. Previously, absentee ballots had to be only given out to people with a medical excuse, or they couldn't be, or they weren't going to be in town. Now, so we go back to that system. So it's fairly tight reason, although if people aren't here all the time, that's a legitimate reason. The important thing is if Vera gets the information signed off and she's able to put in her legal notice in the newspapers, and again, we're still operating under the statute. I think it's more than 3 weeks ahead of the actual vote, then she can do absentee ballots by mail. So there's a big advantage to do that as opposed to everybody having to go down to the office, register, and everything else. So she's constrained by how you vote in municipal referendums. So the thought is and again, the referendum is a fancy word for vote. It will be a machine vote. If we do it all properly, which is our intention, will be absentee ballots. So people can vote in person or an absentee ballot if they're not here or if they're sick or disabled. Going back from that, there has to be a town meeting 2 weeks before that, which then adjourns to the vote. So those are procedural things that have to happen 2 weeks apart. And again, going into the summer schedule, we don't want to have a big event on the 4th of July weekend. And we wanted to have an informational meeting, probably if we can do a hybrid in person and video, and Zoom meeting, we do that. But we do want to have something at least a month ahead of time to get information out there, get an exchange, and get the ability to have other answers or get more information, or if there's questions we don't have the answers to in June, we can get those by July. So that's the rough thinking, looking at holidays, what is a working schedule that also, again, if we can publicize this early, we can get Lisa's Chronicle or Lisa's insert into the Chronicle for June. And again,
Yeah.
that date is May 15th. So again, even though July 24th seems a long ways away, there's all these other dates before to set this up properly.
Mhm.
The maximum amount of publicity, we have to decide on these fairly soon. And these dates work for the town clerk. They work for me. I have to talk to the selectmen. But I think publicizing these things and accurately, because there are 3 different events, and getting them right, and the times and all that is an important detail. And there will be a role for the Cornwall Association. They want to publicize these things.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. So anyway, that's the tentative schedule at this point. But it all makes sense until somebody tells me it doesn't make sense.
Gordon, let me ask one quick question. This is the absentee ballot in this state a by right? And in this particular election will be a by right?
No, that's what
it's-
it said. It's different than what we just had for the presidential election.
Okay,
Because
so-
they did have a by right, no questions asked. This you have to
Okay.
go back to, there's 5 categories under which you can request them, but it's not just because you want one.
right, but
no-
it can be if you're not here, if you're not If you
If you're
don't live
not here, absolutely. That's
Okay.
the absentee thing. I mean, it goes back to the Civil War where they said, if you're fighting for your
Soldiers,
country,
yeah.
you have a right to vote. That's where it started. So anyway, is that clear? But I think again, all this stuff,
Okay.
time and checking things off. So again, that was one of our reasons we stopped last fall, was to make sure the voting
Right.
people are comfortable with this, and they are. And again, we're
Okay.
doing this, well in advance. And again, we should get the explanatory text back. We've got the financial thing. We'll go to the Board of Finance. They know about it. But we basically, we're getting pretty close to checking off the checklist.
Right. Did everybody on the committee get this thing called Talking Finances? Did I email that around to people
No,
that
think-
Barbara put together?
no.
Talking Finances?
Yeah, she
Okay.
has an updated version of what she did before. I
Yeah.
thought we all saw that.
Yeah, I thought I
I've got
sent
it.
it.
Yeah.
So if there were any questions in
So
regard to the
will you send it
finance.
around again, Todd?
What's that?
Will you send it around again?
Yeah, I will. I'll send it again. Okay, so are there any other questions relative to the timing of things? I think we've gotten through that pretty well.
The only small question I had was, who made the motion to approve the minutes?
Lisa made,
I was scratching for
No,
my
no,
pen.
no, it wasn't me. I think it was Dave. I saw
Dave,
your mouth.
And I
moving,
seconded
Dave.
it, I
David's
think.
Yeah.
getting credit.
I thought
Who
Richard
seconded
seconded it.
All
I
right,
seconded it, yeah.
All right,
And it
got
was unanimous. It was approved unanimously.
All right, unanimous. Good.
Unanimous Bosch.
And there is a video of this. Watch out.
Yeah, really. Thank you.
Oh, boy.
Watching out.
So I always put report from engineer on this. I spoke to Steve earlier today and find out if he had anything earth shattering he wanted to tell us. He's pretty laid back at the moment, so.
Yeah,
But
no,
Steve, you
not
got anything?
really. Obviously, we've looked at a site or two. There's some positive things there. I hear through the rumor mill that there's some positive things happening in West Cornwall in general, which is really good.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that for the borough, the village. But yeah, whatever technical information we can help you with, we're here.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
I'll just let you know on I mean, every member of this committee and Steve have been hammering away at this for a long time. And I think the timing is really good because now we are on the way to an economic upswing, and there is certainly interest in West Cornwall. You probably heard about Mr. Betts has rented out his store to a ski outdoor recreation group that started up.
Oh,
It's on the
I didn't hear
Cornwall
that.
website.
Yeah, and I just talked to the owners of the Pink House today, and they've cleared out the last final obstacles to the restaurant opening up down there, or at least getting all their health code approvals. So that's falling into place, and there's more talk of other buildings, being renovated and being filled up. But there's probably 3 active business proposals right now that are being held up specifically because they're at the limit of their septic capacity.
Yep.
So right here, the case is we've got people ready to rent, people ready to move in, people ready to do stuff, but this is the missing piece. And we couldn't really make that argument even a year ago, but now we have people ready to go.
Yep.
So I think the timing's really good. You were all been patient and hard serving. And I just think there is some momentum certainly happening.
Brass ring.
There you
Coming
go.
around.
Okay.
So, all right. So that takes us to the public. There is some public here, I notice. Anybody like to weigh in? Nope. Okay.
I would say,
All right, Mr. Barry, go ahead.
yes, how do you do?
Good.
How about the word several instead of many?
Yeah.
Oh, for the
Yeah.
number of systems? That works.
Yeah, I think think we're gonna leave it to Lisa to tweak this a little bit. But
Listen,
that
just,
was one of the
just
areas.
remember that there was a time when West Cornwall used to look like this.
I wish I could see that better.
Yeah,
Yes. So things change.
things change, yeah.
I have a question. This is Toby.
Who's that? Hey, Tobe.
Hi, I just want to thank you all for doing this and plugging away at this for so long. I'm just curious, and this may have come up, and I haven't been at many of these meetings. Could this sewer system, and do you think the town planning and zoning would be sympathetic to doing some multifamily projects? Would this allow some of the existing lots to have more density on them to achieve some of the other sort of housing diversity goals that are that have been talked about more recently?
Good
Steve,
question.
let's let
Well,
the
a number-
engineer.
I
A
can
number of the
weigh in.
buildings that it would serve would automatically be able to have apartments in them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does bring a number of apartments online once this is completed.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
weigh in on that a little bit if you want, Todd.
I'm sorry?
I can weigh in on that if Todd wants me to.
Yeah, let's hear from you, Steve. on
Well,
that.
basically, it's sort of interesting because, like if you get out by the shoreline to the Westbrooks and the old Saybrookes where we went to visit,
Right.
sewers were controversial down there because they were afraid that it was going to allow down zoning, or I'm not sure the correct terminology, but to allow, multifamily housing where the general public did not want that. But times have changed to the point where that's important. And I think it's important for West Cornwall. And I think that the provision of adequate wastewater disposal can allow for that. Whether I can't speak for the Planning and Zoning Commission of what's allowed or not allowed, but my opinion is it certainly would facilitate the ability to do that, which I think is a great thing personally. So
Toby, we do have a
But
housing.
that is,
We do have a housing planning task force that's meeting right now. And so we have been spending a lot of time talking about housing, and certainly multifamily housing. There already is multifamily housing in West Cornwall. That's probably the only place that has multifamily housing in town. Well, not exclusively, but anyway, there is some there already. And I think, Steve, it's probably a too easy comparison to make that the system at Salisbury, which is much bigger than we're talking about, but probably not. It's what, double the size of ours?
it's almost double in terms of its flow through. The physical size of the facility
Right.
is not double, certainly.
And
But-
as far as the flow is double, and that's accommodating almost 500 people, most of whom are high school athletes that spend a lot of time in the shower. So, and there's nowhere near 250
Wait a minute,
people.
Gordon, wait a minute. Those are boys up there. They don't take a shower.
Anyway, they do once in a while.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez.
So then, I guess my point is there's not 200, there is room to grow in West Cornwall. The footprint is the hardest thing. And certainly multifamily housing is one of the goals, and rental housing is one of the goals of the Planning and Zoning Commission that they're talking about regularly.
And
So,
this is all about like wastewater treatment, right? And how does the water supply, existing water supply and like wells tie into this as well? Like is West Cornwall a good place for water? Are wells adequate to providing that water if one were to densify some of the existing lots?
I think there is some testing that's going on now as far as the drawdown level. Basically, I think somebody said we're sitting on top of an aquifer. And if you look at the historic record, certainly there was many more people there 100 years ago. There's many more people there 30 years ago than there are right now. As far as, they used to fill up a school bus when I was going to school. So, that's not happening today. So, certainly there's historically been a capacity. There is not a formal water supply point, but they certainly did. If you look at all the industry that was there and powered, anecdotal, there's capacity.
My last question is, how would this work with Torrington Area Health Department and their requirements for like a B100A, I think, and sort of having each property still be able to host a septic? Would this supersede that and make that not required? Or how are they working with the town sort of thinking about supporting this?
That's a good question. That's
Well,
great.
they came to our initial meetings and they were very supportive.
Right.
They,
No, but her question is specific to development, right? In that once you have a town septic system in place, how will that impact what a person can do with their property or tell a buyer they can do with their property?
Yeah, that has nothing to do with the health department. That is zero to do with the health department. That's totally in the town purview.
Economic
That's-
development. No.
That's a zoning issue or?
Yes.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it might be reasonable to think, although I wouldn't suggest this
I'm not sure
necessarily,
that's true.
that from the point that the system is installed and working, that any further changes or development, as Toby is saying, is required to tap into the system. I mean, you could imagine an ordinance
Right.
that said that, but
Yep.
I don't know. We haven't talked about that at all, so.
No, I think we should ask Torrington about that because I did have one of those visits and it was specific to Torrington Area Health. There was no weighing in at that point about the from zoning, but I think it's also intertwined, right? So it's, you know, each one has the role to play in terms of you know, what the future is going to look like. But yeah, and the issue about water too is once you have a centralized treatment setting, the 75-foot well rule doesn't apply anymore.
Goes away.
Yeah.
So tapping down into, as whether it's an aquifer or whatever water's down there, you know, becomes a little more possible. But as you say, you don't want to overtax it either. So there are the drawdowns. They have to test, measure, all that kind of thing. Very complicated. Incredible, though, that we got this far, I think. So keep going. Public, oh yeah, more, anything, anybody else, public? Want to talk? Want to ask?
I have
Toby, anything?
one other question.
Yeah, definitely.
Does the change in administration at the federal level, does that open up any possibilities for new, I don't know, new sources of funding?
I have no idea. Gordon, you got any feel for that?
I'm not sure that would, we haven't heard of anything specifically about this project. USDA's usual pipeline, but I know that's one of the things that I have talked to our senators and congresswomen about it and whether it can be supplemental things. I believe part of the thing they're going to push now is some sort of infrastructure program. So haven't heard anything specifically about this, but we're going to be in touch because I know there is some of this recovery money is scheduled to come to the town. So it's still early yet. Still has to. They have to get that signed and done. But we heard some tentatively good news today about that. So.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, I've got to go because
All right. Yeah, we got our
computer
hour.
battery's running out.
Yeah, the golden hour. We're at the golden. Somebody want to bring this to an end? Make a motion to dismiss?
I make a motion to dismiss because I've got to
To
go to a
adjourn?
P&Z meeting.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks, Richard. Motion, any second?
Second,
Lisa seconds. Gordon, Richard made the motion. Lisa made the second. All in
Right.
favor? Aye.
okay.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.